Hello, class. This is Coach Rod. I'm talking to my ANSC 106 class now in a form of a video that I wanted to make last night, but it took me so long to make a video for my other class that I didn't get it done. So I'm going to do it now, and then I'm going to, tell you more what's on the quiz than I usually would. So I want to say that I'm making a review, and you might say, why would I make a review after each day rather than at the end of the week, which I started out to do? Well, it ends up being almost every day somebody is gone, whether it's quarantining, or they got exposed to somebody else, or a grandmother is sick, or they're off someplace at, for a legitimate reason. So I think there's a plus to this. It's like it makes me think of, after each class, what would I say again? And then there's nothing bad about you reviewing what was in class, even if you were in class. If you know anything about learning, you have to review what you experienced to help it make a long-term, meaningful memory. So it's taking longer than I thought, but it's okay. And I'm getting better at this. I use a program called Explain Everything. I don't use PowerPoint. I have nothing against PowerPoint, but I like this Explain Everything. I can enlarge things, I can do things, I can insert photos, whatever. Well, anyway, when we got together yesterday, because I'm recording this Tuesday night. Yeah, it's Tuesday night? Yeah, okay, it's Tuesday night. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm going to tell you where this is at, and hopefully you can see it before class. So you remember last week that Gracie told us about her dog that had this condition. So let me go through these names. And it might look a little different than what I did yesterday in class, but I'll tell you how you can have all these terms. Anyway, ocular, that refers to the eyes. Proptosis is really a term that means a forward projection. It doesn't always mean the eye, but if you ever see it by itself, if you see this and it says the dog has proptosis, it's the most likely thing that they're talking about. It's ocular proptosis. Other texts might call it global proptosis, or websites. Eye prolapse. Prolapse is another term that means, it's something has shifted out of its normal location. So then we have ocular prolapse. And then we have eye luxation. Luxation is another general term that means not in its original place. So I didn't write down ocular luxation, but I could have done that here. I could have done global luxation. So be aware of that. The first term is really referring to the eye, ocular, global. And then there's three following terms that could be used: proptosis, prolapse, and luxation. And of course, we have to show you some pictures. I know Gracie was a little timid, and she said, I'm not going to show you any of these pictures or any pictures, but I'm going to. So here's one of a pug, and it looks bad, and be aware, it's amazing how the eye can heal. I can't really go into it now because I'm not really qualified. But the thing is, this could be called traumatic proptosis. Traumatic means some accident happened. A dog bit this dog, it had an accident, whatever. Traumatic. And another picture, a little closer. This protruding eyeball, actually, it doesn't look bad. If you look at it, that's not as bad as that last one. It's obviously not in its right spot. And and we talked about saline, which is I'm going to review here in a little bit. But now, at the end result, you know that if the eyeball has to be removed, one or both, that's a term called enucleation. So if a dog has enucleation surgery, one or both eyes were removed because of either trauma, some other spontaneous condition, whatever. So now I want to talk a little bit about saline. You can say I have saline or I have physiological saline. Saline means it's a solution of sodium chloride, which we'll get to the recipe here in a little bit. Physiological saline means it's isotonic to body fluids. That's a better term to say I'm using physiological saline rather than saline. Saline means I can't tell you what concentration of sodium chloride it has in it, but it has sodium chloride, NaCl. So it's best to use physiological saline. And now I'm going to bring you the recipe for physiological saline. This would be making a solution that cells of the body don't expand or contract because of the solution they're in. It's going to be, again, I'll explain isotonic here in a little bit, but it's going to be the best fluid to put body parts in or to bathe body parts. Okay? So the recipe here is, and I gave this in class, I actually gave another, made it a little more in-depth. Physiological saline is a solution of 0.9% sodium chloride, and it's always in water. But then I could say, and I'll take rid of the percent, and I'll make it into grams, something you could weigh out. So to make physiological saline, and we'll do this in class on Wednesday, which is tomorrow. I'll bring some salt, I'll bring a little scale, and show you how you can do this at home. We're going to try to establish, like how much of a teaspoon 0.9 grams is. So I've got a scale, I'll bring a teaspoon, I'll bring some salt, and I might bring a measuring cup just to show you how you can do this at home. It might not be a bad thing to keep in your mind. So here's one formula. 0.9 grams of table salt plus 100 mils of water. Well, then that's the same as 100 cc's of water, and that's the same as 100 grams of water. Notice all these are equivalent. So you could write down 100 mils equals 100 cc's equals 100 grams. This is water. 1 mil of water weighs 1 gram. 1 cc of water weighs 1 gram. And then at the bottom, I put a larger amount in because if you ever work in a laboratory, you probably won't, you might work with 100 mils, but who knows. But here's the other formula. Just multiply everything times 10 up and above. So 10 times 0.9 is 9 grams of sodium chloride plus 1 liter of water. 1 liter of water would be 10 times this, 1,000 grams. 10 times this is 1,000 cc's. And a liter is 1,000 mils. So there's the recipe. Should know that for the quiz, of course. And then I wanted to bring this word up, isotonic, or the phrase isotonic solution. Isotonic solutions have the same osmotic pressure as body fluids. So, and maybe I'll make another video on this, but when you put a red blood cell in an isotonic solution, it stays the same size. It doesn't shrink, it doesn't expand and explode. It stays the same size. There are other solutions where you can rupture red blood cells, and if you have plain water, that's what happens in plain water. And if you mix blood with plain water, it ends up being the blood cells rupture, hemolysis. I know we had a little bit of that before, but I'm going to stop here with that and go on to my next topic. Okay, now on Monday, Corinne, alias Haley, I guess she prefers Corinne, prefers it. Yes, that's great. Okay, she gave a presentation on horse management, kind of went through different things, feeding, maybe housing, medications, drugs that can be used, drugs that cannot be. She mentioned thoroughbred horses, which is almost another world in the horse world. She mentioned draft horses, which are my favorite. Just can't get over how big and beautiful they are. So I just want to make a few comments about horse management. There is a course on campus that you can take and learn about horses, horse management. Now, if you're a horse person or a horse girl like Corinne, then I'm not sure how much you can gain from a course that might start from the beginning. I don't know. You could ask people that have taken the course. But I just wanted to do a few things for our quiz, and for those that felt a little overwhelmed by how many drugs that were named and what do you use them for, and I'm never going to ask you that because it changes and it's somewhat subject to somebody's experience and opinion. But here's some facts I can tell you about that are quizable. The first is horses are termed hind gut fermenters. And I want to define that term. By the way, rabbits are hind gut fermenters. And believe it or not, pigs are hind gut fermenters. So I just gave you 3 animals: horse, rabbit, pigs. Hind gut refers to after the intestine, after the small intestines. Usually when you talk about gut physiology, you're talking about the small intestines. So hind gut means after the small intestine, basically. So after the small intestine in the horse, there's a place where there are bacteria and protozoa working on the cellulose. Cellulose is fiber, and it can be fermented with bacteria and protozoa. And that chamber in the horse is called the cecum. The cecum is actually at the junction of the small intestine, where the small intestine ends, and the large intestine starts. Maybe I can go back to the gut and say, remember, that's the small intestine, and that's where most nutrients get absorbed when they're being digested. But the cecum is back after the small intestine, right at the junction of the small intestine ending and the large intestine beginning. And it's a fermenter of bacteria, of forages made possible by bacteria and protozoa. But you should know that that's not a ruminant. A horse is not a ruminant. A ruminant technically is called a F-O-R-E gut fermenter. A ruminant, like a cow or a deer. That means they have this large vat that is breaking down cellulose, which no mammal can do. You have to have bacteria that have the right enzymes. And so a cow doesn't really have much of a cecum, but it has a large, what's called rumen. And so cattle and sheep and goats and deer are ruminants, and they ferment roughage in their rumen. So, to summarize, horses are called hindgut fermenters. They have a cecum, very large, and their small intestine is large, but they are not a ruminant. And then I want to show you, I'm bragging now a little bit, of a horse I saw completely dissected. And not many people have seen this, and I really should show this more. But here, and I know it's a copyrighted picture, I'm not selling it or anything, that's why all these things are there. But you can see there's a gentleman here, and I'm going to name him in a minute, in front of this horse that looks like all the integument, that skin, has been removed. And there's a person riding this horse. And you might say, is that a real picture? Folks, that's a real picture because I saw it. I wasn't there when Gunther was there, but I walked up and I didn't touch it, but I was literally inches away. My nose was inches away from any of these body parts. You might say, how is that done? It's a process called plastination. And Gunther here, who works at a medical school in Germany, perfected this. It's a long process, takes many skilled workers for the dissection, but then what you get, and this is a human, and the human has donated their body to science. The horse probably didn't have anything to say about it. They can't sign a waiver or whatever. But this is a real horse. This is a real person. Notice here's the face of the person. The person, its right arm is holding its own brain. Over here, this picture isn't as clear, but then on the left hand of the person, it's holding the horse's brain. Now that might not be the right picture I'm thinking about. Maybe they did a couple horses. But anyway, that's the human's brain. You might say this is grotesque. Well, some people thought so, but let me show you another view of that horse. It's real. It's called plastination. And here it is again. And I think they had a couple horses, so I'm not going to guarantee that I saw this exact one, but here's the person again riding the horse. It's got in its right hand its own brain, and on the other side, which you can't see, it's holding the horse's brain in some views. I went to this display in Chicago, Museum of Science and Industry, and let me tell you, it was fantastic. It was spectacular because there was much more than the horse and the rider there. There were, up to 100 displays of this process called plastination. And, if you've ever dissected preserved animals, there's always smell, like formalin, which is toxic. Not many places use formalin anymore. But this is a process that Gunther worked out that is odorless after it sits there for a while. You could walk up, like this guy is not smelling anything different than if you had a plastic Tupperware bowl in your kitchen. There's no odor to it. And that's spectacular. I mean, look at this. There's the trachea. It took them hundreds and hundreds of hours to position these animals. You position them, and then you have the animal and the people react with a certain gas that you have to put this whole thing in a chamber, and it like solidifies everything. So none of this is movable. I mean, this is like think of a piece of Tupperware. It's, it's spectacular. Okay, but I had to show you that. I saw that. I'm a horse lover. Went horse riding in the Rockies at Estes Park. Horse riding in the Black Hills of South Dakota. I've been bucked off a horse. I think my tailbone still hurts from that. When I was really young, there's a picture of me, which I could have found, but I probably can't find right now, of me riding a horse when my grandfather was cultivating the potatoes with 2 draft horses. And I was on one. I was probably 5 years old, and when I got off, I couldn't even straighten out my legs. If you've ever been on a big horse, you know what I'm talking about. And yesterday, Morgan was telling us about chimeras. And I just wanted to, reiterate what she had said. She made a lot of great comments. It's a complicated subject, let's put it that way. But here's something that you can take home. And cats are a great example. So a chimera cat is one, let me get my laser pointer fired up here, is one cat that started out as 2. That's not a bad way to think about it. It's 2 cats, and then they got fused into 1 cat. So they have 2 sets of DNA because the pair of embryos, remember I said 2 embryos fused into 1 early in the mother's womb. In biology, we don't like to use the term womb. We call it the uterus. There's so much you can learn about the uterus. Anyway, so it's the mother's uterus. That's where pregnancy occurs. So the cats are born with their own DNA and then plus another one. So some like to say that a chimera is its own identical twin. Okay, that's not really true because if your identical twin would have the same DNA. So anyway, Morgan introduced that topic. It was great. It's complicated, but I do want to show you some pictures because, man, can you find some pictures of cats that are chimeras? And what's really neat about it is that it's actually an anatomical lesson. So now we have this cat, and it looks like 2 cats fused into 1, but what's amazing is, look at how accurate that line is. This is the right side of the cat. I know it's the left side of the screen, but it's the right side of the cat. And this is the cat's left. And you draw this line almost like you had a pen or a ruler. And that line is a great way to teach anatomy. That's called the mid-sagittal plane. Maybe I'll quickly write that up here. Mid-sagittal. Mid-sagittal plane. Also called the medial plane. We'll see how that shows up. So what I'm saying is this line between the 2 distinct colors is called the mid-sagittal line or the medial plane. Line, plane, I'm using those interchangeably. So there's your first anatomy lesson. The medial plane divides an animal into roughly a left and a right half. Pretty much perfectly, supposedly. Okay, so now I'm going to get that out of here. I'll put that up here. I've got a couple more pictures of cats. It's spectacular. Now here's another one. But look at that line. It's like, wow. Right down the middle, right? And then a pretty one with different eye color. Okay, so here we got the line, and then it's got different eye colors. So it's like, okay, here's the cat. Here's the first cat. Here's the second cat, and we're going to like press them together. So thanks, Morgan, for introducing that neat topic. Now, finally, I do want to talk about the quiz tomorrow. And, we'll spend some time talking about the quiz before we take the quiz if you need to. I know we have a couple presentations to do as well, but we'll get it all done. So here it is, the quiz on Wednesday, tomorrow. So here's the hint. Material in this wrap-up quiz. I'm not sure how long it's going to be. I haven't baked it yet, but we've talked about some topics. And then material on this other quiz that you should have already probably looked at, but you can review. And that's this one. I'm going to put this up here. So tomorrow's quiz, material in this wrap-up video, which I'm going to send out a notice on Brightspace soon. But then this video, this is a instructor talking about the endocrine system. So just this one, review that one, look at this video, this wrap-up video, and remember how I like statements of fact? Can you write down statements of fact about these subjects, like saline? The recipe for saline is blah, 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 right? Saline is an isotonic solution, blah, blah, blah. That's, I gave you two right there. So I'm going to quit, bake this, upload it to YouTube, and then tell you about it, where it's at. It's going to be on our website. It'll be called the wrap-up of week 5A, because I only did 1 day wrap-up. And I feel like I might need to do this because there's always people gone. People aren't feeling well. The weather has been kind of crazy. We'll see what happens with the weather. But take care. Always email me any questions. I'm in that classroom before class. I'm in that classroom from about 11:30, 11:15. I have a class at 11:30 in there. That's not you guys. But then you guys come in at 2:30 or so, and I've been there all morning. So you can see me there if something is making you uneasy, but hopefully not. Take care.